Hello everyone, welcome back to another video, another talk, and this one is inspired by a comment I got from the previous episode, Social Media and Morality. This is by Slizer. It's a really well thought out comment, and I really appreciate it. I'm going to start by handling the comment with the first paragraph, and then I want to get into a bit out of order on the comment, because Slizer88, and if I'm mispronouncing that I apologize, but Slizer is talking about some things here or referencing some things that I wanted to talk about anyways. So let's begin. Now, Slizer88 does mention immediately that editing would benefit this series, and they are correct. Alright, I want to be upfront. Editing would improve my talks. They specifically dislike the pauses and filler words. The filler words I freely admit to. I'm trying to work on that. Okay? The filler words are me not having my thoughts organized before I speak, as properly as maybe I should. Okay? But I don't want to edit the videos, despite the fact that it is objectively a better thing to do, because these are supposed to be very off the cuff. These are, my ideas, my opinions, my thoughts on various things, and editing would take away from that. I am aware that this makes them slightly less listenable. I am aware of this. But this is really more to get things off my chest, more than anything else. And get people thinking, at minimum. So I'd rather have the unedited content, even though it's not as smooth, so to speak, than edit it and have people wonder if these are really my off-the-top thoughts. For the pauses, though, the pauses are actually intentional, but that requires a little bit of back story. I am a professionally trained tutor. I can legally charge you as a professional tutor in a variety of topics, such as English and accounting, professional writing, etc. The big part of that training that I went through to get that certification to become an officially licensed tutor was education on, literally education, how people learn, how people process, how people remember. And one thing that's often mentioned in that training is to leave pauses. Why? Two reasons. The first of which I'll get into in a little bit more detail because it's one of my criticisms of social media. But the first reason is overload of information. By spewing a whole lot of information at people all in one go, you are going to overwhelm their brains with information, and they're not going to be able to critically process it all. Some of it's going to get lost, and what is included, what is retained, is not going to be viewed as critically as maybe it should be. I'll get into that in a second, but let me mention the second reason. The second reason one deliberately leaves pauses in an educational whatever, be it a video, a speech, a document, whatever, right, etc. The second reason to leave pauses is to emphasize particularly important points. Give people the time to process a point that you consider particularly relevant, okay? So the pauses are intentional. Those are not accidental. I leave those pauses in there to ensure that the listeners, whoever they might be, have the opportunity to sit for a few seconds and actually absorb what I'm saying or a particularly unusual point that I'm trying to get across. But the filler words and the editing, absolutely true. Slizer does mention that, of course, does appreciate my more nuanced approach to generational stereotypes, and in the previous video I did discuss quite a bit that the ways in which older generations would be incorrect about the younger generations, right? But now it's time to tackle a subject that younger generations often get incorrect, which is their alleged increased awareness of situations happening in the world due to their better grasp of social media. You see, the problem with social media, one of the bigger problems with social media and this claim of the younger generations, is that social media not only permits, but often abuses overload of information. When you open any social media app, you are bombarded with things. Here's the most relevant news to you. Here's statements by people you follow. Here's what's going on in the world today. Here's all these other things. Okay? You are immediately blasted with information. And to reference one of the things I said in my previous episode, where I was talking about how easy it is to lie on the internet, a lot of that is either going to be outright lies, or it's going to be half-truths based on either mistaken assumptions or deliberate lying. Deliberate deception would be the better term for that. As a result, this overload of information is going to be, more often than not, wrong. And in order to discern right from wrong in these statements, truth from lies, you need to be able to take a moment to process it, to critically analyze it, and that's not what people are doing. We have studies starting up that are showing that the next generation, the younger generation, the current teens of today, are less media and internet literate than my generation is. Okay? And again, keep in mind I'm 30. And this isn't the fault of the children, okay? This isn't the fault of teens. If you're a teenager listening right now, this isn't your fault for being less media and internet literate. That's not your fault. It's just that media and the internet is constantly bombarding you with information. And you're not being trained in media literacy, in critical analysis of relevant things. When people talk media analysis or critical analysis even, right, they're talking about classic literature, right? That is, when people hear critical analysis of anything, they think movies, they think critical analysis of books, they think of all these other things. But that isn't what it's limited to. Critical analysis applies to anything you're absorbing or trying to absorb, whether it's an alleged factoid, or it's a movie, whether it's the statements of another person made to your face, or if it's a tweet made on Twitter or X, depending on what you want to prefer to call it as. But that literacy is declining because it's not being taught in schools, which it should be. And additionally, on top of that, it's absolutely not really being used or encouraged on social media. Social media is banking on a lack of internet and media literacy, specifically media literacy. Okay, again, it is easier to lie on the internet than it is to tell the truth. The truth requires research. The truth requires you to take a moment and think about things. Lies don't care. I can bust out a lie on any social media app significantly faster than I can bust out a fact-checked truth. Okay? And people take advantage of this. To go back to an example I used in the previous episode regarding cryptocurrency scams, the victims of those scams are not necessarily stupid people. They're not even necessarily gullible. Some of them are. In fact, you might even claim that many of them are and probably be fairly accurate. But that doesn't make them stupid. The problem is that they have just been overloaded with information, right? Because what's essentially happening is, back in the craze of cryptocurrency, there was a whole bombardment of information on how rich people were getting off of cryptocurrency and how this cryptocurrency was shooting up in price and this person was promoting this cryptocurrency, therefore it must be good, bad. Just an absolute absurd amount of information. Again, a lot of it false or otherwise misleading to entrance into the space. Okay? Because I entered the space, I worked in finance at the time. I was curious at minimum. as to what that whole phenomenon was. Immediately bombarded by so much information that I have to take a step back and look at it from the outside and then go in, second, right? Look at it from the outside first, then actually intermix. And I wasn't impressed. But that's because when I was first bombarded with information, I stepped back, right? Which isn't necessarily the first instinct of a lot of people when they're bombarded by information. They're going to dive in and assume that by diving in head first, they're going to access more information. And that is technically true, but again, that information is going to be tainted by people with an interest. Even today, the crypto bros and the people who are bamboozled are promoting cryptocurrency not because they believe in it anymore, but because they understand that the fewer people believe in whatever cryptocurrency, the more the price drops and the more they lose themselves. Okay? It has nothing to do with belief at that point. That is purely a matter of gotta keep these people rolling into this cryptocurrency so that way I don't lose my investment. Right? And that's exactly why the American culture war exists, right? A lot of media with a particular political slant is going to bombard its target audience with a whole bunch of information, most of it irrelevant. Because the point is not to inform the audience, the point is to confuse the audience. And the easiest way to do that is to just overload them with, ideally, half-truths. Worst case scenario, you just make up a whole bunch of shit and hope nobody notices. So when the younger generations, in counter-argument to the older generations, claim that they're better informed, they definitely believe so. Don't misunderstand me. They believe that to be the case, and they absolutely have easier access to information than older generations did. The problem is, in what they're failing to realize a lot of the time until they're older, is that in order to access this information, it requires them to stop and think about it. Right? This is why so many manosphere creators and womanosphere creators just absolutely spam content, right? Andrew Tate did not promote his content via his audience just because he wanted to get his name out there or get his content out there. That's a happy side effect, but I think what he was really trying to do was overload his target audience, young impressionable guys, with a combination of truth and outright lies, and thereby suck them into his worldview, where he could then proceed to sell them this course that they would believe in because they believed in him, because they didn't critically analyze his statements, because he overwhelmed them with his statements. And ironically, and this is a serious concern as well, critics of Andrew Tate made this worse, because they're all spamming out dozens of videos criticizing this statement of Andrew Tate's, that statement of Andrew Tate's, these actions, whatever. And while they're not wrong, there's a lot to criticize Andrew Tate for. They were adding to the grotesque amount of over-information, excess shit, basically, overloading these young guys' brains. And the same thing can be said of the womanosphere. It's just not as big as the manosphere yet, but it will be. The whole process is going to rinse and repeat, I would say, in a decade with women. Whole thing. Everything wrong with young men now, 10, 15 years, you'll see repeated with young women. Women, I'm talking teens to early college. Okay? You're going to see the same thing happen. It's just going to rinse and repeat. The only difference is what genitalia they're sporting. That's really the only difference. Another point that Slizer makes, which is very accurate, do not misunderstand me, this is absolutely something that happens, is the validation that people get from number go up. A lot of YouTubers have spoken quite extensively on this subject, back when that whole conversation was being sort of acknowledged finally in YouTube. And while streaming doesn't quite acknowledge it yet, or I haven't seen too many people in those spaces acknowledge it, Kick, Twitch, etc., the same thing applies, right? Number go up, the good chemicals get published in the brain, to put it in a bit of a more understandable way, right? The problem is that, and Sizer is also very correct about this, a lot of people don't go the route of degeneracy when pursuing content creation, which is absolutely true. But I don't think that this is necessarily tied to moral correctness or moral good or morality at all. I think this is because a lot of people who watch clout chasing behavior realize that this is absolutely not how one sustains a long-term career. It's about image, right? We all have an intrinsic need to project a good image. It's part of humanity, right? It's part of that social part of the animal part of us, because again, humans are still animals. We still have social needs, and part of those social needs, because we are more aware, we operate at a higher level of intelligence than animals. Part of that is our image, right? It's part of the reason why people lie about the things they've done in their life. It's why people lie about how much money they're making, right? By renting luxury cars and pretending they're actually owning these cars, right? Things like that. That all has to do with image, specifically. And one thing that I think prevents people from going, say, the Jack Doherty route, if I'm mispronouncing that, I do apologize, even though he's not really a respectable individual. Anyways, Jack Doherty is unemployable. I'm going to be really brutally honest about it. His face is on the internet being a degenerate, basically, being a harassment, being a PR liability to infinity, right? And absolutely no one is going to hire him and acknowledge that publicly. Okay? While he's making money now, true, he is also shooting any serious potential career in the future in the foot. Okay? Because all of Jack Doherty's antics on livestream include his face are real. This is him actually harassing people on the street, and he's widely known. He's creating his own PR nightmare of his name, attached to his name and face. Okay? Even if he was using an alias, his face is still out there, connected to these shenanigans. And no respectable company looking to improve its relationship with the public is going to hire him, because everyone knows he's an asshole. His content doesn't do anything constructive for him. We'll get to that in a second. And in terms of the ability to sustain any career long term, he's really crippling himself here. Because let me ask you this. If you owned a business, any business, would you hire Jack Doherty for anything? The answer is no. Not even for PR. Can he market himself? Absolutely. The problem is he can only market himself negatively. Right? The attention around him is purely negative. There is no positive coverage of Jack Doherty at this point in time, and I don't remember there being that much positive coverage before now. Anyways, right? And that's what a lot of people realize. Even if they themselves find such content amusing, they're not going to follow down that path, because they understand that in the long term it's going to hurt them. It's going to hurt their image, right? A lot of people leave that kind of content behind when they hit high school. And to counter a point made by Sizer, I think the one part that I actually actively disagree with was Sizer's claim that prank TV shows back in the day ran on the same thing, but those were almost entirely staged. There may have been one or two that were genuine, but the bulk of those, and I'm talking 90% plus, were staged, right? Just like the YouTube prank channels staged all their pranks. Same thing. The prank TV shows staged most, if not all, of their pranks. That wasn't real. But these live streams are, and they're pulling in viewers. A lot of viewers. Children or no, these are people who find harassing people on the street to be funny, to be good entertainment. And some of these young individuals, because a lot of them are younger, are going to see all of this, and they're going to imagine that Jack Doherty went off into the sunset with millions of dollars, and while he might in the short term, in the long term, he's got no career, right? He's got no way forward unless he shapes up real quick and real hard. Which I don't think is going to happen, but most of the people, when they get to their late teens and they begin applying for those part-time jobs that high school students tend to get, they're going to realize that in order to succeed in life, at least to some extent, they have to market themselves, right? People start watching what they say on social media a little bit more at around that time. People are more aware of how their actions are perceived at that point because, again, they're marketing themselves to potential employers. And as a result of that, they understand that acting like Jack Doherty is a bad idea, but not everyone's going to pick up on that. There's always going to be those individuals that aren't going to pick up on that and do the same thing. If you think Jack Doherty was not influenced by the last generation of pranksters, I'd guess he was. I think that these kick streamers harassing people for pranks, this is just the second generation, inspired by the previous one, and I think they're going to inspire a further third generation, who are going to do similar antics and also get jail time, right? That's the issue here, in my opinion, right? We have an overload of information, for one, and we have people out here using that to their advantage, and or otherwise using the internet for negative reasons to get attention and fame and money and everything, right? Now, Sizer does mention that I possibly am looking at this too much in the framework of incentives and self-interest, and maybe I am. I probably am. I come from a background of finance and law, and money and self-interest are the predominant motivators of negative behavior. I am an inherently cynical person, so that's a fair criticism. But I do think that in the context of this generational discussion, when younger people say that they're better informed, when younger people say, oh, people in your generation would have done the same thing, right? I have to disagree. I think Jack Doherty does what he does because he doesn't think in the long term, and he's got a lot of incentive to keep doing this in the short term, and I think eventually he's going to look back and regret it because it's shooting his career in the foot, any career in the foot, regardless of what he chooses to try to pursue in the future. I don't think he's going to hack it because his face is attached to a lot of negative actions, a lot of stupid things to do, and a lot of people, even his own followers, wouldn't hire him because they understand what that looks like from the perspective of media, and even if they personally find his content enjoyable, they wouldn't want to attach themselves to it professionally out of, essentially, self-interest, i.e. selling themselves to future employers or future careers, right? Or their own business, giving the hiring example. But that is, the primary points that I wanted to make here off of Slizer's comment. It was a fantastic comment. To Slizer88, again, I hope I pronounced that correctly, but to Slizer88, I do appreciate the comment. It was really well thought out. Thank you very much for the comment. But at the end of the day, you're correct on a lot of things, but I have to disagree on the incentive and self-interest. But then I'm also biased in that I'm coming from a background where that is the predominant motivator, right? Another point that I want to highlight really quick that Slizer made, which is, again, absolutely correct, is that both selfish and selfless people can fall into the addiction of serotonin or other good chemicals being released when number go up, right? The addiction to attention on the internet. And that is true. Even good people can become addicted. But I think at that point, you have to wonder how good they remain, because addiction changes people. Even if they recover from it, they're not the same person, right? So even in that example, while I agree with it, I think extrapolating that out to the rest of a person's life, I think it changes them permanently. And while occasionally it is a positive change, they come out stronger, they come out better, they help other people try to avoid addictions, a lot of people come out just as bad, if not worse, right? Unfortunately. Again, that's my cynicism talking, though. But with that being said, thank you all very much for listening. If you liked this, please like and subscribe. If you didn't, please ignore me. And if you have any comments, questions, concerns, ideas, suggestions, or requests, please leave them down in the comment section below. And thank you all very much for joining me, and have a great 24 hours.